A Muslim YouTuber and preacher named Sajid recently discussed the impact of Muhammad Hijab's infamous Holes in the Narrative interview with Sheikh Yasir Qadhis. According to Sajid, that podcast has done more damage to Islamic dawah than any other podcast in history.
And this has to be probably the most damaging podcast, I think, to date in regards to the du'at and the destruction it caused.
The destruction it caused?
The destruction it caused.
Dawah destruction?
The destruction it caused.
How did Muhammad Hijab and Yasir Qadhis cause such destruction? By calling the preservation of the Quran into question.
We've just seen him progress and just expose himself, but then he goes on to Muhammad Hijab's platform and starts giving the preservation of the Quran question. Like, I'm speechless.
If you missed the Holes in the Narrative interview, you'll only be able to find some short clips because Muhammad Hijab and Yasir Qadhis scrubbed it from the internet. Their panic was understandable considering Dr. Qadhis' shocking admissions.
When you do a deep dive is when things get very, very awkward and difficult. These are very, very difficult issues. And the most advanced of our scholars, they're not quite fully certain how to solve all of the unanswered questions in there. Traditional understandings of ahruf and qira'at cannot answer some of these pressing questions that are now being poked. In a Muslim environment, we'll press a little bit and then we'll say, okay, khalas, sami'na wa ata'na. And that's great, alhamdulillah. When you go to academia, they don't have that red line. And they're going to just, the famous story of the emperor with no clothes. They're going to just point out, no, that doesn't make any sense. Well, that's not true, and this and that. And they'll bring issues, which I'm not going to mention explicitly, that you know are true because they're in your own books. They're not inventing anything new. The standard narrative does not answer some very pressing questions. By and large, our ulama in the Eastern world are not aware, by and large, of what's going on in the Western side of things. And there are 15 opinions about this. None of them fully answer all of the questions that are raised. Some of them answer more than others. What is happening in the last few years is not me anymore. It's the Western academics. These problems are now becoming mainstream.
If I were to give you a blank mushaf, and tell you to write what is munazzal verbatim from Allah into that mushaf with no human interference, would you write something which corresponds?
It's not an easy answer. It's not an easy yes or no. And I don't think it is wise to bring it up in public because it should not be said in public. I don't even want to be explicit. It should never be brought up in public. This is not something you discuss amongst the masses, ya akhi. It's not wise. Leave it at that, ya akhi.
Now, Dr. Qadhis didn't say anything that critics of perfect Quran preservation didn't already know. But the interview caused a massive backlash because a popular Muslim scholar was finally admitting that there are holes in the narrative.
And it's very clear to you and to every single very advanced student and specialist that the standard narrative has holes in it. That's what I'm going to say.
This is not a joke.
This is not a joke, brothers and sisters.
The impact on Islamic dawah, which is the Islamic version of evangelism, has been catastrophic.
Ever since that podcast, subhanAllah, those of us who are involved in da'wah, like myself specifically, I'll talk from my own experience, the amount of comments I get from Christians, from people who are against Islam and they want to sow seeds of doubts in the minds of Muslims, over and over and over again, they use speech and quotes from Yasir Qadhis from Muhammad Hijab's podcast to try and do that. It's like every single day on social media.
So, the dawagandists keep trying to tell people about the miraculous preservation of the Quran, but people keep responding by pointing to the Holes in the Narrative interview, which thoroughly exposes the myth of perfect preservation. The collapse of this Islamic myth is especially painful to people who converted to Islam because they were too gullible to bother investigating the myth when it was presented to them.
The reason I embraced Islam fundamentally in the very beginning was because I saw that the Bible wasn't preserved. I wanted to know, did Allah give us a preserved scripture? And when I found the Quran was clearly the speech of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, clearly it has been preserved, clearly no doubt about it. That has been like the main talking point when I give da'wah to people, to Christians specifically.
So, many years ago, someone came up to Sajid and said, "The Bible has been corrupted, but the Quran has been perfectly preserved." And Sajid said, "Wow, I guess I'll mindlessly believe everything you just told me and I'll convert to Islam instead of spending 5 minutes investigating what you just said." And because he was gullible enough to fall for the myth of perfect preservation, he's always used this myth as the center of his dawah. But now that even Muslim scholars are admitting that the Quran hasn't been perfectly preserved, the myth just isn't working anymore. Sajid tries to tell people about the perfect preservation of the Quran, but they don't believe him. They ask questions. They're not as gullible as he was. And he can't take it because he has no other evidence to give.
So for that podcast, to put a question mark on that for people, I mean, the damage it caused, subhanAllah, it's beyond words.
Poor Sajid. His faith is grounded in a myth. His dawah is built upon a myth. And now that the myth is collapsing from under him, he has nothing left to stand on. All he can do now is blame Muhammad Hijab and Sheikh Yasir Qadhis for exposing the myth. But this video isn't about Sajid. This video is about being relentless in exposing these Islamic myths. Years ago, Nabil told me that exposing the myth of perfect preservation would do more damage to Islam than anything else. At the time, I thought he was wrong. I thought that facts about Muhammad and jihad were far more powerful than facts about changes to the Quran. But I wasn't thinking like a Muslim. Nabil was. And Nabil understood how much the perfect preservation of the Quran means to Muslims. You just heard Sajid, a Muslim preacher, admit that non-Muslims are wreaking havoc on Islamic dawah just by raising doubts about the preservation of the Quran. Imagine what would happen if Christians and atheists and Hindus and others learned how to expose the holes in the narrative. It would be the collapse of dawah and the eventual collapse of Islam. If you'd like a quick introduction to some of the relevant evidence, be sure to watch my classic video with Nabil titled A Brief History of the Quran. The video features Nobel Prize-worthy research with, quite frankly, Oscar-worthy acting.
Yo, what's creepier than James White's obsession with Bart Ehrman and young Muslim college kids? David Woods' obsession with Yasir Qadhis' comments. Now, David Wood has been obsessing over this whole Muhammad Hijab and Yasir Qadhis interview that was done a few months ago. I think it was done in April or May or whatever. But anyways, according to Sajid and David Wood, like you saw in the clip, his entire video, according to Sajid and David Wood, they say, now, Sajid is a white convert to Islam. So what that means is that he's going to get more attention just because he's white. And these white converts to Islam get a lot of attention from other Muslims. Even when they don't know what they're talking about, they still get a lot of attention. But anyways, according to Sajid and David Wood, they say that Yasir Qadhis' ridiculous claims about the preservation of the Quran in that podcast interview where Qadhis says the standard narrative has holes in it has been damaging dawah and Quran preservation claims. So according to Wood, Qadhi has a shocking admission about the Quran. Now, my question is, did massive people apostate from or leave Islam because of Yasir Qadhis' comments about the preservation of the Quran? It doesn't look like it. It does seem like some Muslims are bothered by Qadhi's statements, but it doesn't seem like people left Islam or apostated from Islam just because of Qadhi's statements. Qadhi or Sajid's comments about that podcast interview about Qadhi saying the standard narrative has holes in it. It doesn't mean anything. Just because Yasir Qadhi says something, it doesn't mean it's true. The thing about Yasir Qadhi is, my theory about Qadhi is that Yasir Qadhi isn't a Muslim. He's actually an atheist. He's actually an atheist pretending to be a Muslim. It seems like he's an atheist pretending to be a Muslim because he's been influenced a lot by these Orientalists and these Western scholars when it comes to, Islamic studies, the Quranic studies, etc., etc. But where are the Orientalists and the Western scholars getting their information about Islam from? All their information comes from Islamic scholars, Islamic sources, Islamic books. But Qadhi, Sajid, and David Wood don't prove anything against the Quran's preservation. They didn't prove the Quran wasn't preserved. Did Yasir Qadhi show problems with the Quran's manuscripts? No. Whether it's the Sana manuscripts or the manuscripts that predate the Sana manuscripts? No. Did Qadhi say there's corruption or addition in the Quranic manuscripts? No. Did Qadhi quote non-Muslim scholars who agree that the standard narrative has holes in it? Or there's problems with the Quranic manuscripts or the standard story? No, he didn't. Qadhi didn't show any manuscript proof. He didn't show anything. Or non-Muslim scholars quotes. He didn't. Basically, Qadhi didn't prove anything in that interview. But people like Jay Smith, David Wood, etc., are taking that short clip and literally blowing it out of context, or just blowing it out of proportion, or over exaggerating what Qadhi says. Now, Qadhi, I don't know. Adnan Rashid really chewed Qadhi out for his statements because he wasn't careful in his words. I don't know. I don't know why Qadhi said that. I think Qadhi does have some doubts about Islam, but that's Qadhi. That's Yasir Qadhi's problem. Why does that? Why should that affect other? Why should Qadhi's doubts affect other Muslims? But anyways, let's go into the Qiraat and the Ahruf. Now the Quran. Now this is a very basic point about the Quran's recitation. The Quran has a very unique aspect in its mode of revelation. The Quran was revealed in 7 different ahrufs, or 7 different modes. Each mode constitutes the entire Quran. Each mode was to address the 7 different dialects of the Arabs in Arabia. Now there's something else, the Qiraat. The Qiraat are ways of reciting the Quran. Now there's an important difference here. The 7 modes of the Quran are the 7 different ways the Quran has been revealed. The ahrufs of the Quran is the actual content of the Quran, while the Qiraat are actually the way of reciting the Quran. What is established and agreed by Muslim scholars is that the 7 modes are revelations of the Quran and are the same modes of the companions of the Prophet who recited the Quran, and the Prophet Muhammad approved of it. The way we recite the Quran today is the same way the companions of the Prophet recited the Quran during the life of the Prophet Muhammad, which is all that matters to us Muslims at the end of the day. Now, during the time of Uthman, who was the 3rd caliph, a caliph and a companion of the Prophet, there were new converts to Islam who formed some of the Muslim armies, started to argue with one another. They were saying my recitation of the Quran is better than your recitation. However, they were clearly speaking out of ignorance, since all the recitations are inspired by Allah. That means all the ahruf and the kirat go back to the Prophet Muhammad, in turn go back to the angel Gabriel, in turn go back to God or Allah, who revealed all of the Quran. So one of the companions of the Prophet, named Huzaifa, came to the Uthman and told his fear and concern about these disputes among the new converts. So Uthman came to Hafsa, one of the wives of the Prophet Muhammad, and got the manuscript of the Quran, which was approved by Abu Bakr. And he had Zayd and 11 other experts of the Quran, which they wrote many manuscripts of the Quran. These manuscripts were then sent to others in Arabia, and other manuscripts were burned. They were burned for dialect reasons. Uthman burned the manuscripts, and this authoritative Quran was preserved, the same Quran that was approved by one of the disciples of Muhammad, which was Uthman, which in turn was which was the same Quran recited by Prophet Muhammad, which was the same Quran delivered by the angel Gabriel, which was the same Quran delivered by Allah. So today we have the original manuscript of the Quran. Every single Muslim agreed with the Uthman manuscript. Even Ibn Masud later on agreed with Uthman. Ali even said that the Quran manuscript was the same as the Quran recited by the Prophet's companions. Uthman had several enemies during his life, during his caliph. Not a single one of his enemies accused him of tampering with the Quranic text. As for Ibn Masud agreeing with Uthman, there's many different. For example, we read in Ibn Hazm Fasil Malal Niyal, Volume 2, page 212. He says that Ibn Masud, the statement that Ibn Masud's manuscript is different from ours is invalid, a lie, and a slander. And then we see that hang on. There's basically, Ibn Masud later on agreed and approved of Uthman's Quran, found in the Islamic literature, like Ibn Askar and Tariq Dismal agreed with this, and Ibn Askar, Tariq Dismal, volume 33, page 144. Imam al-Bakani also said that, and one of the strongest statements that Ibn Masud later on agreed with Uthman is Ibn Masud's reading was transmitted to us through 3 different chains in readings. All of these 3 readings agree with the Uthmanic manuscript. Basically, Ibn Masud later on agreed with Uthman. As for Quranic manuscripts, etc., well, I made a video a few months back, I think 2 months back, showing that we have early manuscripts, which match today's Quranic text. We have manuscripts that predate the Sana manuscripts. So we have very early Quranic manuscripts. Even non-Muslim scholars who have PhDs in Islamic studies from Western universities like Fred Donner, etc., agree that the Quran we have is the same Quran that was recited by the Prophet Muhammad. Now, they don't think that the Quran is divinely inspired, so they say, but they don't agree that Allah sent the Quran down by angel Gabriel, or the Quran is supernaturally inspired by a divine being, because they're either atheists or whatever. They have anti-supernatural bias beliefs, but they say that the Quran we have is the same Quran that was recited by the Prophet Muhammad 1400 years ago. So even non-Muslim scholars agree with this. So Yasir Qadhis saying something different it doesn't mean anything. It just means Yasir Qadhis has doubts about his faith. That's all it means. He didn't prove anything against the Quran's preservation.
Many early Quranic manuscripts predate the Sana manuscripts. Let me walk you through these. The first we have according to Dr. Tyre Eklund, it is my right to say that it belongs to the second half of the 1st century after Hijrah. Copies attributed to Uthman and Ali. Page 14 by Tyre Eklund. And it contains 99% of the Quranic text. It is a complete manuscript of the Quran, as the Topik manuscript, and it is identical to today's Quran as well.